Hello and welcome to the English Podcast Lab. I'm Mike, and it's great to have you with us for another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're joined by the fantastic Sarah to tackle a topic that's already creating a ton of buzz, the 2024 U.S. presidential election.
It's a big one.
It is, and everyone wants to be informed, but who has time to wade through all the noise out there?
It can be overwhelming for sure.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, the U.S. election process can feel like a maze, especially for those outside the state's primaries caucuses, that mysterious electoral college.
Yeah, it's enough to make anyone's head spin.
It really is. But that's why we're here. Today we're cutting through the clutter to get to the fundamentals. When is the U.S. election, and when can we reasonably expect to know who's won?
Well, for all the talk about how complex the U.S. system is, the actual election date is refreshingly straightforward. The entire country votes on a single day, Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. Millions of Americans making their voices heard all on the same day. It's really quite something.
It's a true national moment. But here's where it gets intriguing. The new president doesn't actually step into office until January 20th, 2025.
Yeah.
That's a pretty long gap between the election and the inauguration, filled with transition, potential drama, and a whole lot of speculation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And something else that often gets overlooked is that on that same November 5th, voters aren't just picking the president, they're also choosing the representatives in the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate.
Oh, that's right.
It's a detail that's easy to miss, but absolutely critical for understanding the power dynamics in the U.S. government.
Now let's talk about those battleground states everyone's always buzzing about. The states that could go either way, Democrat or Republican, keeping everyone on the edge of their seats.
Right, they can really make or break a candidate's chances.
You really can. So they wield an outsized influence on who ultimately wins. Which states are we keeping a particularly close eye on this time around?
Well, some familiar names are popping up again. Pennsylvania, with its 19 electoral college votes, has been a key battleground in recent elections and is shaping up to be just as crucial in 2024. Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Nevada also went to Biden by incredibly slim margins in 2020, making them prime targets for both parties.
Right, and I remember how nerve-wracking it was watching those results come in back in 2020. It's wild to think that the fate of a nation can hinge on a handful of states.
That's the nature of the electoral college system for you. And what's even more fascinating is how the political map is constantly evolving. States that were once considered swing states, like Florida and Ohio, have been leaning more consistently Republican lately.
Interesting.
But as always, in an election year, nothing is set in stone.
So come election day, we'll see millions of Americans heading to the polls. But it's crucial to remember that mail-in and early voting have become increasingly popular, especially with all the recent conversations about voting access and security. Election day isn't just about that one Tuesday anymore.
Exactly. It's more like election month now.
It really is. And here's a little trivia for you. Because of the U.S.'s multiple time zones, polls close at different times across the country. Picture this. You're on the East Coast watching the results trickle in while folks in Alaska and Hawaii are still casting their votes. Talk about adding to the suspense.
Oh, absolutely. Which leads us to the big question on everyone's mind: when will we actually know who won? While news networks often call states based on early trends on election night, the official winner might not be declared for days, maybe even weeks, especially if the races are tight or there are recounts.
So we need to be prepared for a potential waiting game.
We do. History shows us just how unpredictable this can be. In 2020, we had to wait a grueling 4 days for the result to become clear, largely due to the incredibly close race in Pennsylvania. But then in 2016, Hillary Clinton conceded to Trump the very next morning. So buckle up, it could be a quick resolution or it could be a long, drawn-out affair.
You make a great point. We need to be prepared for anything and practice a bit of patience. It's also essential to stick to verified information from trusted sources during the potentially chaotic post-election period. Misinformation spreads like wildfire, and those premature victory declarations only add fuel to the fire.
Couldn't agree more.
So there you have it. You've learned the crucial election date, the factors that could sway the outcome, and a realistic time frame for when we might expect those final results. But this is just the start of our journey. We're on the cusp of what's sure to be a captivating and potentially turbulent election season.
It's going to be a fascinating ride for sure.
So we've talked about those nail-biting battleground states, but you know what really fascinates me? The whole electoral college system. It's such a unique way to choose a president. What's the story there, Sarah?
Yeah, it definitely sets the U.S. apart. It's not as simple as just counting up all the votes nationwide. Instead, each state gets a set number of electoral votes based on its population. To win the presidency, a candidate needs to snag at least 270 out of the total 538 electoral votes.
So it's like a strategic game almost.
Yeah.
Like you need to collect enough pieces from different states to win.
Exactly. And that's precisely why those battleground states get so much attention. They can swing the entire election.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a close race where just a few thousand votes in one of those states could determine who wins the presidency.
Talk about pressure. No wonder those campaigns focus so much energy on winning over voters in those key areas. You know, it reminds me of that infamous 2000 election where everything came down to a tiny margin in Florida, sparking weeks of legal battles and recounts.
Absolutely. That's a prime example of how this system can create incredibly dramatic and sometimes controversial situations. And it can even lead to a candidate winning the popular vote, but still losing the presidency, as we saw in 2016.
Right, which is wild. Speaking of 2016, that election really turned the conventional wisdom on its head. We saw states flip that were considered reliably red for Republican or blue for Democrat. Do you think we're in for similar surprises in 2024?
Well, you know, one of the most captivating things about elections is their inherent unpredictability. The political landscape is like a constantly shifting terrain. Demographics change, the economy fluctuates, global events unfold. It all influences how people vote.
So we can't just rely on polls and past results. We have to consider the broader context. It's not just about who people say they'll vote for. It's about understanding what's driving those decisions.
I couldn't agree more. It's crucial to delve into the issues that resonate with voters. What are their worries? What are they hoping for? By grasping those underlying currents, we can gain a much clearer sense of where the political winds might blow.
Now, we've been focusing on the presidential race, but let's not forget that voters are also choosing their representatives in Congress. What are some of the key House and Senate races to keep an eye on?
There are quite a few Senate seats up for grabs this year that are considered toss-ups. Some of these races could very well determine which party controls the Senate, which, as you know, has huge implications for the president's ability to get things done.
All right, a president's success can hinge on having a cooperative Congress. It's a fascinating interplay of power, but it definitely adds another layer of complexity to an already intricate election process. For our listeners who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all this, what's the key takeaway here?
I think the most important thing is to stay engaged and informed. Don't let the complexity of the system discourage you. Read widely, think critically about the information you're consuming, and engage in thoughtful conversations about the issues that matter most to you.
I wholeheartedly agree. This election is too important to sit on the sidelines. It's not just about who occupies the White House. It's about shaping the future direction of the country and upholding the values it represents. So before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear from our listeners. What are your thoughts on this election? What issues are at the forefront of your minds? Share your insights and predictions in the comments below, and we'll be right back with the final part of our deep dive, where we explore some potential scenarios that could unfold as we approach November 5th. We're back, and as we get closer and closer to November 5th, I'm really starting to feel the energy.
Oh yeah, the anticipation is definitely building.
It is. We've talked about those crucial battleground states and how this election is likely to be incredibly close. But what are some of those key factors that could really tip the scales in one direction or another? What do you think?
Well, one thing that always plays a major role is the economy. A strong economy usually benefits the incumbent party. But if voters are struggling financially well, that can create a real opening for the challenger.
Makes sense. People want to feel secure about their future, and if the economy isn't doing so well, they might be ready for a change. But beyond the economy, what else should we be paying attention to as we head towards Election Day?
Voter turnout is huge. Which segments of the population actually show up to vote, and in what numbers can have a significant impact on the results? Both parties are going to be working hard to get their base energized and motivated to vote, and they'll be trying to sway those undecided voters too.
It's all about getting people excited and engaged. And speaking of excitement, this election already has a ton of buzz surrounding it. Two well-known candidates with very different visions for the country. It feels like the stakes are incredibly high.
Absolutely. And I think that sense of urgency is only going to intensify as we get closer to November. Get ready for a flood of campaign ads, rallies, media appearances. It's going to be nonstop as both candidates try to win over voters.
It's going to be a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, putting you on the spot here, if you had to make a prediction right now, who do you think will win this thing?
Oh, I can't resist a good prediction challenge, but honestly, it's just way too early to say for sure. As we've been discussing, there are so many factors that could influence the outcome. It's going to be fascinating to watch it all unfold.
It definitely will. And, that's what makes it so exciting. This election has the potential to really reshape the political landscape of the U.S. It's a reminder that every vote truly does matter, and we all have a role to play in shaping the future of our country.
Well said. And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive. I hope our listeners found this exploration of the 2024 U.S. election informative and engaging.
I know I have, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and walking us through all of this.
It was my pleasure. And remember, folks, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, get out there and make your voice heard.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, we want to thank all of you for joining us on this deep dive into the 2024 U.S. election. It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope you learned a thing or two along the way. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the English Podcast Lab for more deep dives on all sorts of interesting topics. Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations going.